With 11 state championships in school history, Wright's football is undeniably one of the most distinguished programs in Indiana. But through the years, there's one team that stands above the rest because they did what no team before or after could. The 1961 Wright's Panthers were the first and only undefeated, untied, and unscored upon in school history. The Panthers were led by Indiana Hall of Fame head coach Herman Byers.
Coach Byers was such a disciplinarian, and I don't know about the other guys, but I was afraid of him and Horn. I tell you, those guys, they scared me. They would scare you.
Byers was a perfectionist that demanded excellence every time his team stepped on the field. So that's what the 1961 team gave him. One after another, Wrights racked up win after win and kept their opponent off the scoreboard along the way.
I don't think we even realized what was happening as far as people not scoring on us. They just didn't score, and that just seemed natural to us until about halfway through the year. And then, of course, Coach Byers made a comment. He said, "Are you aware that we're unscored on, and we could conceivably go the rest of the season unscored on, if you guys work hard at it?"
But those shutouts were less about their defensive dominance and more about the dominance of the running game. Wrights would only pass the ball a couple times a game, relying on clock management to beat their opponents.
If you don't have the ball, you can't score.
With two all-state running backs in Don Hanson and Danny Jones, plus a stellar offensive line, Wrights bullied teams, never giving up a single point along the way. But they had their close calls. In the final game of the year against Bosse, Wrights was playing its second-string defense when the Bulldogs marched down the field and passed the ball to a wide-open receiver.
He just drops the ball goes over his head and drops right in front of him. So all he had to do was stick his hands out.
Now had the chance to catch up with that player recently, and he was relieved that he didn't spoil a historic season.
And he said, "I'm so happy I didn't catch that pass." He said, "How horrible it would have been." He said, we weren't in your league at all.
Call it luck or call it fate, but there's no taking away the accomplishments of the 1961 Panthers. Reporting from Evansville, Blake Sandlin, Eyewitness News.
A building that still stands, but a school that looks different.
Lincoln Avenue was bristling then because we had businesses on Lincoln Avenue, black businesses.
Lincoln High School is just a memory to some, but to a group that's become fewer and fewer, it's still alive.
Yeah, I'll be 88 in July, so I'm trying to get to 100.
James Anderson and George Flowers have been friends since they were teenagers, and today they're remembering that time.
Until it came out of Indianapolis, I think that's where he came from.
A look back on high school is nothing without talking football.
I remember some big hits because fullbacks got big hits. I like to forget them, and whatnot, really, because you're pushing against 2 or 3 linemen, and that's probably why my back is out of shape now.
James was a star on the team, and George, a younger classmate who looked up to him.
The teams would come from St. Louis or Paducah, or Cairo, Illinois, Nashville. Yeah, to play us on Thanksgiving. And I think after 49, they stopped all of that because we played Mater Dei.
It's that game against Mater Dei that's etched in the city of Evansville's history. It was the first time a white school would agree to play the all-black public Lincoln High School.
And that was the first white school that we played in 49, and whatnot. So, and we played them out at Bosse Field, And that's the first time Lincoln had played out there.
A stage set for history. The first time Evansville's all-black school played on its premier stage, it came away with a victory.
We wanted to win. We practiced harder that week before.
The first integrated game was the end of a long road for Lincoln, one that included a lot of actual travel.
East St. Louis High School was named Lincoln like ours, but I think they got some older fellas would come down when they played us because they were big, big, big.
With no white schools in town willing to play, Lincoln spent most away games on the road in other towns that were segregated in the 1940s.
We didn't have no motels or hotels we could go to, and the families of the students would come and pick who they would let stay with them.
At school, on the road, and At their home movie theater, life was segregated for George and James.
And the whites would sit downstairs in the cushion seats, and we sat upstairs on wooden benches.
Yeah.
You sat on the ridge, on the back, with your feet in the seat.
Right.
Because you had to be able to see over the top of the people that were sitting in front of you. But this is the way it was.
Not all memories of the way things were come with a smile.
To get shoes and things for us, she would have to measure our feet at home, take a string. We couldn't put our feet in shoes.
Couldn't try them on.
Couldn't try them on.
The memories of being seen as second class in their hometown can bring pain and questions that still don't have good answers.
I'm a human being. Why am I being denied this? I've worked hard, I had to take and I've stayed clean, I've not broken the law. Here I am, and I'm still treated as a second-class citizen. Why? Because of this? That doesn't make sense.
As two old friends look back, once again, they find their feet on the turf of Lincoln's football field for examples of proof they were equal.
I've been to the field and actually lined themselves around. That was mostly white fans that would sit in those cars because we were always in the stands and whatnot. And it was the Lions Club. That was the biggie because they would in fact display a banner when they came in. They supported Lincoln football.
A time and a school that may not exist for kids today, but Lincoln High is very much alive in this room.
As far as growing up, man, we enjoyed us right there in our community. I mean, you didn't have no more than I did because I had big fun like you had big fun. Only it was just a difference the way we did it.
The 60s and 70s can arguably be considered the golden age of high school football in Evansville, thanks to some legendary names.
For me, you start with Archie Owen at Bosse, and then there's Don Watson at Harrison, Gene Logle at Memorial, Frank Will at Mater Dei.
Fierce competitors on Friday night, and even better friends.
You walk between the lines and they didn't like each other. When the ball game was over, they were the best of friends.
When facing each other, you knew it was going to be a battle. You don't want to lose to your friend. They'll do anything to try to get that edge. But after the game was over, they would shake hands, probably gave each other a pat on the shoulder.
Perhaps it's because all of these legendary coaches spent years playing together before taking over their own programs.
They were all Evansville guys, and most of them played for U of E or played, local high school football, and they just had a camaraderie together.
Maybe it's because they spent time together away from the field.
We had a coaches association, and that involved all the high school sports at the time. We had, before school would start, we'd have a luncheon the day before school start. We'd give awards for city champ, who won the city championship. We'd give them a little plaque and things like that. Great thing because everybody's having a great time with each other. Next night you're out on the field battling each other. They don't have that anymore.
Whatever the reason, it led to a unique time in Evansville high school football history, and a time that hasn't been duplicated.
Those guys, that was just the golden age, I do believe.
In the late 50s, Evansville was a growing city in need of a new Catholic school.
It was built to accommodate baby boomers after World War II.
In 1959, Rex Mundy High School welcomed 280 students, 200 of them freshmen, and in that group was now its most famous alumni, Bob Greasy.
His name awareness was early. He started on the very first football team. He was a freshman.
Greasy was one of the first to star on the athletic field. Rex Mundy found success fast, and in the 60s, continued to win games under quarterback Randy Mattingly.
I was fortunate enough, we played on a city and SIAC championship team. We were 8-1-1, and the class 2 years behind me was 10-0.
Like Greasy, Randy helped take a new small school to big heights, instantly competing with established programs like Mater Dei and Memorial, with the future looking very bright on the field.
As far as rivalries go, as long as we beat the two Catholic schools, it was a success.
It was just 12 years after inserting themselves into those rivalries that they came into play off of the football field. Evansville was no longer big enough for three Catholic schools. one had to go.
One of the school board members made the motion to close, and the first thing he said is that I propose that Mater Dei High School, and I thought he was going to say closed, be closed. He said be retained and Rex Mundy be closed. And I took it, I could breathe then, you know.
I was angry at first, you know, the school closing. But then as you get older, you realize the economics of it, and that's the one that had to close.
This would have been a hard sell down here in this valley. And Rex Mundy was out there on First Avenue, and they felt like it was a better real estate sell.
The year the school's most famous alumni led the Miami Dolphins to the NFL's only undefeated season, Rex Mundy was forced to shut its doors on what could have been more athletic success.
2 brothers younger than me, but one of them went there 3 years and it closed, and then he went to Memorial. And then my brother Don, he went to Memorial all 4 years.
Only open for 13 years, a lot was packed into the pages of Rex Mundy's athletic story. It'll be read by many, but only truly remembered from firsthand experience by a select few.
We've got a little special bond, our group, because we're a finite group now. You know, it was so big, and it's eventually going to end. There's not going to be anybody from Rex Mundy around.
It was only a few decades after the country was finally connected by rail, and a few decades before World War I, that football came to Evansville.
The schools, at the time, they were playing basketball, baseball mostly. So this is a new thing where a bunch of guys would get together and form a team.
1894 is the first time football is recorded being played by club teams or a group of guys who just decided to get together. High schoolers played whoever they could, no matter how old.
One year in the early 1900s, Evansville High School played Vincennes University twice, once up at Vincennes and once back here, and they beat them both times.
The age gap and distance mattered because rules were still being learned. It was common in the early 1900s to see a rule book like this one for fans to be able to follow along, and things were simpler than what we know as football today.
There's no passing. It's all a ground game there. So these guys, it's more equivalent now what you'd think of a rugby game there. These guys, and they'd pile on, and people got hurt, people got killed.
The rough nature of the game became a grim reality one fall day in 1908, involving the local YMCA.
In November of that year, they're playing a team from Henderson. Albert Dougherty ended up on the bottom of the pile. There, came out paralyzed and died a few days later. And it was one right after that happened, the high school made it mandatory that the parents had to give permission for their kids to play. And most of the people refused.
It was the very next year after that death that the state of Indiana began to regulate football on the high school level. Memorial High School football has a winning history, but no run may be better than the 5 seasons between 1934 through 1938. Each team went undefeated, but one stood out as the best.
In 1937, all 11 Memorial players made the All-City.
The Tigers blew out every Evansville team that season and went 11-0. But when the season ended, a team from northern Indiana was voted the state's #1 and therefore champion.
They were voted #2. Well, that kind of ticked the coach and some of the powers that be off. In fact, the mayor of Evansville was on the committee to bring in a team. They said, we can't win the state championship, but let's win a national championship.
A national search landed on McKeesport, Pennsylvania. The team in the Keystone State was also undefeated, but weren't named state champs. It didn't take much convincing to get them to come down to the Wrights Bowl.
Once the team from Pennsylvania made its way to the city of Evansville, it quickly found out it wasn't just the students, the staff, and the community of Memorial High School they were having to play against. It was the whole town.
The only time that, to my knowledge, where the whole city backed one team, and rightfully so, because they were playing for a national championship, and they've had the cheerleaders from the other schools participated. The coaches from the other schools were on the bench with Don Ping, Memorial's coach. So it was really a citywide effort, and was quite an amazing feat.
Memorial won big, shutting out McKeesport 21-0. The city of Evansville came out on top that day. As for Memorial, it was just the next year the team began to schedule other schools very far away in Muncie and South Bend, and they beat them too.
Beat the two northern teams that they played, and they got the mythical state championship. They got the state championship in '38, the national championship in '37.
Bosse Field, home to professional baseball in Evansville since 1915. But did you know the old ballpark also has a long history of high school football?
We tend to forget that not every high school had a high school football stadium of its own for many years. Several high schools used Bosse Field as their home field for many years. Of course, Bob Greasy played here. He may be the marquee name.
From 1915 to 1971, over 500 high school games were played at Bosse Field. The baseball park was also the permanent home of Rex Mundy football.
It was just a regular game for us. It was a little different because you knew the baseball diamond was there. Being a kid in high school, I never thought about it. I'm sure that some people did. I just was thankful that we had a stadium to go to.
The last game was played in 1971 when Jasper beat Memorial. Then nearly 40 years later, Memorial returned to Bosse for one more game on August 26, 2011.
That was a great experience. The field was a great setup, and we built Belleville West End from over around St. Louis, and we were fortunate enough to come out with a win that night. But it was a great atmosphere. I think fans enjoyed it, and I know the kids really enjoyed it as well.
Call high school football at Bosse Field a forgotten history for some, but for many others, memories that will never fade.
50 years later, and I think about the history of that stadium, it really is pretty neat that we played there, and it'll always be a good memory for me.
Sports is about memories, and it's about the place. And for so many people, to my surprise, I'm 65, the connection is football.
In the NFL, playing football on Thanksgiving Day is considered a major spotlight. Everyone's watching. But before TV on Thanksgiving, football belonged to high schools.
But it was always one of those where, you knew well in advance, who was playing there for the Thanksgiving game.
Dating back nearly 100 years, oftentimes the best football matchups of the season were saved for Bosse Field on Thanksgiving Day.
And that was kind of like the finale there for years there. That was the big game you played on Thanksgiving, and whether it was a championship type game or, the two big rivals, in the area like that there. It was one of those well-attended games then, where people turned out.
More than just about the game, it was something the family did together in Evansville. One of the biggest social events of the year, with some attending the game worried very little about its outcome.
This is when you had, the big, the cheer squads and the cheerleaders, and everybody, went along, with them.
For some, it's been 6 decades, but as they recall Thanksgiving in the city, football comes to mind, and the smells fill their memories.
People come back home and get up that morning. That's all you could smell is the sage and whatever on Thanksgiving morning. People cooking all over the community and getting ready for Thanksgiving dinner. And you up early going up to the school, Lincoln Field.
A lot of traditions come alive each year on Thanksgiving, and for many this holiday weekend, just as they always have, football may be the most important one.
There's a lot of the people that left home or that graduated from Lincoln, they come back for that day. That was a big day. Every year, Thanksgiving was a big day.
The sights, sounds, smells, and feelings of a high school football game are unmatched.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
Any player on the field tonight will tell you how special it is, but it takes those who haven't played the game in a long time to give the perspective of just how long the feeling lasts.
I just always knew I was going to play football, and but the biggest thing is just making the friends and the camaraderie, and being with all the players. I'm still friends. I still talk to a lot of the guys I played with in high school and college.
A bond built on the field in a few short years lasts for decades.
When they had reunions and stuff, I came back to all of them. We talked about everything, about sports.
All it takes is for one student to be struck by the emotion the game brings in high school to begin a tradition of spending Friday night with family and the same people in a seemingly never-ending fashion.
They have some wonderful people, and they have wonderful memories. Their kids go there, and it just keeps going and going. So and I enjoy that standpoint, not only watching the games and seeing the teams play, but seeing some old friends every week like that too.
But in talking to more than a dozen former players in the Tri-State on this 100-year anniversary of football in Evansville, what stands out most is how many who've been removed from the game for so long feel like their character is forever shaped by their time in pads.
It was something that helped me grow into a man. I was this kind of awkward kid, and I started playing football and I got knocked around, but it was something that I could have a sense of pride in.
And I don't think I would trade those memories for anything, and I certainly believe that it made me the person I am today, helped me to generate life and get through life, trials. Yeah, I wish I could go back and recreate it. It's a short, it's over fast. It's a short time span. You think it's forever when you're in that time span, but it's very short.